You know what pile of garbage I saw recently? Transformers. The latest Transformers. Holy shit. It's very bad.
Hey, welcome to episode 67 of Front Seat Gamer. I'm Nick. I'm here with Severn.
Hey, Nick.
And Blake.
Hey.
And this week we have a special guest. You may not have heard of him. His name is Chris something. What was your name?
Chris Wilson. Hey.
Okay. And from what? From Grinding Gear Games?
Yeah, I work at the same place as you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Chris
How
is
long
here.
You work there? A while now. It's been a while.
Fairly, have you settled in all right?
Yeah, I'm feeling at home now.
That's good.
The first few years were rough.
So that's very exciting. I'm sure our listeners have been waiting for this for a very long time.
It only took 6-8 weeks to get this together.
Chris is a very busy guy.
But also, after 3.0, Blake was on holiday.
Oh, yeah.
Then you went on holiday, Nick.
Yep.
And then Chris was booked out for a full month.
Yeah.
Well, you kept picking weekends where I had business trips and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just horrible scheduling.
So normally we start off an episode by talking about what we've been playing. I've been playing Hearthstone as usual, but also Cuphead, which came out about a week ago.
Yep. 2 weeks. 2 weeks
that
ago.
game is beautiful. Probably my favorite looking game at the moment. It is just so good looking, and it's really fun, but it's also ridiculously hard. And so if you don't like platformers and or you don't like dying 48 times in a row, stay away from that game. What have you been playing, Svern?
I've been playing Quantum Break. I'll talk more about
This
it.
is by the Heavy Rain team, right?
Remedy?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did Heavy Rain.
No.
We had
No?
this exact conversation.
You're thinking of
Last time.
you're thinking Quantic Dream,
Yeah, probably.
the PlayStation guys. No, this is a Sony. This is a Microsoft game.
Okay. What?
Um,
Really?
Yeah, we've
Okay.
talked about.
We
this
have
before.
talked about this. You went off on a massive tangent about time-traveling photons
Yeah.
and Darwin's theory of evolution.
Yeah, that sounds like me. Yeah. So how's that game?
It's good. It's good. I actually want to give more time to Chris.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, that's fair.
I've been playing the least number of games.
Yeah.
We want to hear about it, man.
Yeah, what have you been playing?
Almost exclusively mobile games the last few months
Uh-huh.
because of the crunch for both 3.0 and the Xbox version and the China version, and there wasn't
Yes.
much time for serious gaming.
Yeah. Bathroom
so-
gaming.
Yeah, this is basically bathroom gaming and Ubers and planes and that
Yep.
kind of stuff. The one that's worth talking about is Solitarica. You guys may have discussed it before. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Very good
I-
game.
I think we may have talked about it. I think this was quite early on because I got that more than a year and a half ago, something like
Yeah.
that. We talked about it.
I'm late to the party. But
Yeah.
the thing I like about that game is it has this it feels a bit like playing Path of Exile solo self-found because the options that are available to you are random for your build.
Yeah.
So you know what you kind of want to build, but it's at the whim of the RNG to see
Yes.
what you're going to build that game.
Yep.
Hence you want to play it multiple times.
Yeah, I found that game fascinating because you are creating a character build, but adhering to solitaire rules.
Yes.
And it was, and each class feels distinct, which I thought was a mind blow. Like, how do you make solitaire feel like multiple classes?
They
are
released
distinct?
new classes recently that are like mono attribute.
Yes, yeah, and those are really hard. I managed to beat one of them. I think I have to replay that.
I haven't checked them out yet because every time I want to, I'm on a plane, so I can't do the purchase.
Yeah, that game is awesome. They've done some balance changes to that game that made it a lot harder. They nerfed the heck out of stun. So stun was broken, overpowered though. Like you could just stun lock bosses from like game 4 onwards on certain classes. Man, I love that game.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
So that consumes a bunch of time.
Yep.
And I've also been into incremental games. Games like Egg Inc. and Deep Town and that kind of stuff. They consume a bit of time every now and then.
Deep Town.
So I'm not recommending Deep Town. I just happen to have put a lot of time into it. But it's one of those iterative games where you upgrade your capabilities and make
Yep.
more stuff. And it's got a relatively complex crafting system. But it's not, it's not the best game I've played. It's just one that happens to be one I haven't finished yet.
Right. There've been a lot of action RPGs coming out on mobile recently, I've noticed, and a lot of them use some incremental, like some sort of idle game systems that also adhere to action RPG, like random loot stuff, which I thought was interesting. And I haven't actually played a good action RPG on mobile yet.
The controls are really tough.
Yeah, it's not suitable in my opinion. But they've got some ones where you just auto attack nearby monsters and you pick up loot and then.
Yeah, there was one I played that I think was recommended by a listener called, I think it was called like Nonstop Night, like Night with a K. And
Okay.
Your little guy just runs through a dungeon automatically, heading towards every monster.
Yeah.
And you just tap the abilities to use.
How is it?
It's fine.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, that's basically my opinion of mobile.
Like, I mean, it's casual, so it's, I guess, good for mobile.
Yeah, you don't. I think part of the problem is, at least right now, there aren't any ARPGs on mobile that have like interesting, flexible loot systems. It's all just direct upgrades.
Yeah,
and it's all very straightforward. And most of the time, it's just like you've got your 4 primary stats and you upgrade them, and you get stronger, and that's it. There was one, I forget the name of it, that was like a multi-tiered dungeon where you actually have to. It was like a roguelike. You explore the dungeon, you encounter monsters, and you like there are traps and.
This Pixel Dungeon?
No, though that game's awesome.
Yeah.
If you haven't played Pixel Dungeon is great. This was more like the original Diablo, and except that unless you leave if you die in the dungeon without leaving, you lose everything. So you have to sort of choose when you think you've hit your limit. That was the most interesting part of it for me, was just figuring out when you can quit. What about you, Blake? Have you played anything?
I just finished Horizon.
What?
So I'm pretty stoked about.
How was that?
It was good. I played it for like easily 8 hours yesterday.
Okay.
Finished it. Man, that game. I really like that game. I'm kind of sad it's over.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Have you got lots of side content to do?
Nah. There's not a lot of side content in that game. The side content is just like undirected, where you're just running around and being like, I'm gonna kill this herd of giant buffalo,
right?
And that's it.
It's not like NPCs.
I mean there are, but there's not a lot. Like you'll go to a random town and there'll be like 2 quests there, and then you do them, and that's kind of it. But yeah, the DLC for it is coming out this month, I think. So I'm actually really looking forward to that now. Yeah.
Do you know what it is? Like, do you know it's in the DLC?
All I know is that I'm pretty sure there's a new area because they're hunting some strange robot or something.
Okay.
So,
cool.
But it's just more. If it's more, then it's good. I'm looking forward to it.
Were there parts of the world that you weren't ever sent to?
Let me think. There kind of was. Like there's places, there's corners and like areas of like jungle that I didn't really explore as much as I kind of wanted to. But I could go back there now and check it out. But really, now that I've kind of finished the game, it's like I'll just be looking at the scenery and being like, oh yeah. Because the map shows you all the sort of hidden collectibles to find anyway.
Right.
Actually,
what's the point if it shows you where the hidden collectibles are?
It shows you the general area where they are. So they have an icon and then they have a radius around it. So it could be anywhere in there. But that's not a large area. Yeah.
Are they at least hard to find?
Some of them can be tricky. Some of them are just on the side of the road. There's
cool.
There's one I was looking around. I was like, where is this? And then, it's right by the road.
Do you think it was just like a week before the game was meant to be gold or whatever? They were just like, just plonk it here.
Because it's weird. Some of these things, you Savannah have played it. So did you go around collecting those metal flowers?
I did.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of them are in like really, really tough places, like up high on like cliffs surrounded by like birds and invisible robots and stuff. And then others are just like I said, on the side of the road, and you're just like, oh, there's one. I wasn't even looking for it.
I only went for the middle flowers like when they were close to where I was doing anything.
Yeah, same. I haven't really gone out of my way for them, but
do they get you anything good?
No, they don't. Not really. I don't. You trade. You collect 3 or 4 of them as a set, and then trade them into someone in the city for a purple loot box. And that's just more loot, and I never have to worry about loot because I'm just killing stuff all over the place.
And you've beaten the game.
Yeah, and I've beaten the game. So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Chris, I know you were playing Elite Dangerous for a while.
Yeah.
Do you still play that?
I haven't recently.
Okay.
But
because
you're playing a lot of fun.
Oh, did you? Because I borrowed your Oculus.
Yes.
Did you play Elite Dangerous?
No, you stopped me playing it. No, I'm kidding. No, I had an experience that some of our Path of Exile players have had where I was having fun doing one specific thing, and then they made a slight balance tweak, and then I never played it again after that point.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah.
What was the balance tweak?
Back when I was playing it,
Yeah.
there were specific rules about how you could, how pirates spawn in certain asteroid fields when you're
Yeah.
going to just try to grind out cash.
Sure.
And so they said, well, this is a bit abusive. Everyone's just spending their time doing this. It's the best way to earn money.
Right.
And so they made it more complicated. I tried it once and quit. And I mean, I'm sure it was a good change, probably the right thing. It just happens to be that I didn't play it again after that point. And I only realized this a long time later when I look at my behavior that,
Right.
I didn't play after that. So I sympathize with people who enjoy one part of a game and then it changes very slightly, potentially for the best.
Yeah.
And then it kind of detaches them from it.
Yeah, because that was the thing you were enjoying doing.
Yes.
And that experience is now different.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
I keep meaning to try the game out again whenever they release new content.
That game's got some like weird semi-online stuff, right?
It is an online game. It's just one that's done in a different way than what we do.
Right. In what way is that? Like what? In what? Well, how does it work on that game?
It trusts the client a bit more than Path of Exile.
Okay.
So there have been issues with fairness and so on in the game, but I'm sure they're working on it. They know what they're doing.
All right. Cool. Trading in that game. Is that multiplayer? Like, or is that?
So, at the time that I played, which was
Yeah.
a while ago now, you could trade with other players by going to the same place and jettisoning stuff and trusting the other person to pick it up and jettison stuff for you, and it was possible to trade. But most of the trading was with the computer-controlled space stations and so on.
Yeah.
Like your trading player would go from solar system to solar system doing trade runs, not for other players.
Sure. Blake, you've been playing No Man's Sky, and they've got multiplayer now. Like officially they've got quote unquote multiplayer.
Yeah.
Where you can see other players as glowing balls of light.
Yeah.
Can you actually interact with other players?
I don't know. Look, the game is so big. You're never going to meet another player.
Except that
Except for
sometimes
when
you
people
do.
do. Sometimes you do. I don't know. I haven't looked it up.
Because it's interesting to me the way different games do interaction with other players.
Yeah,
especially games for which there's no cost involved in online play.
Yeah. I don't know what they've got now, but like I remember seeing people because you could put down like a console that has a little message like Dark Souls, like Dark Souls message. So they had that, and then there were people standing in the same spot, seeing these things appear and like having a weird conversation.
Oh, right. They would be dropping these. Like,
Yeah. That was before you could see each other as glowing balls of light. So I don't know what the interaction is now. But the thing is, my closest player interaction is what I talked about, where somebody named a planet after me. And that's it.
That was good. All right, so we've got some questions that we tend to ask our guests when they come on because these are pretty generalized. For the listeners, we're probably not going to talk too much about like the nitty gritty of current day Path of Exile, but we will probably talk about Path of Exile history. But before we get to that, actually no, let's go with this first question by Rykus because this actually helps us get to that. How did you guys get started as like a game developer? So I know, for example, that you met Jonathan and were friends. I think you were in uni.
Yeah, we met at high school.
Oh, in high school. Okay.
Yeah. He was the kid using the computer in the library at lunchtime, which I was meant to be using. So we met and talked programming, and then later on when he went to university, he was a few years younger than me. When he went to university, we spent a lot of time hanging out, and it was very clear to me that if I was ever going to get into game development, I needed to have a really good programmer like that working with me. So I kind of groomed him in the direction of starting a company together. And then when he finished university, we were in a position where we could create grinding gear games. And so that was his first job out of uni.
Wow.
And by then I'd met Eric. Actually met him playing Diablo 2. We met on the Lurker Lounge forum, which is a strategy forum that existed back in the day that was quite popular. And so, I mean, think of it like, Reddit 15, 16 years ago. And so we met, and at the point that Jonathan and I wanted to find a lead artist for the project, I said to Eric, where would we find someone like this? And he said, I'll catch a plane, and then turned up.
Let's talk a little bit about Diablo 2. Came out in 2000?
Yeah, June 28th.
Yeah. And it sounds like it was an important day. When did you get it? Did you get it on day one?
I played in the stress test event beforehand, which is when they gave out keys to people. You could only play up to the first few areas, and so that was very formative.
And you started playing day one.
Yeah.
How much time did you put in Diablo 2?
A few days after Diablo 2 came out, I had university exams, so I shouldn't have put very much in. However, the only exam I ever failed at university, ironically economics, was 3 days after Diablo 2 came out, because I did little other than play it.
Wow.
So I turned up very unprepared, somewhat annoyed that I couldn't be leveling.
But you learned economics in D2, didn't you?
Oh, I mean, sure, the economics was no problem. I went on to do a lot more economics. But technically, in terms of actually passing that exam, Diablo 2 got in the way.
Wow. And do you still play Diablo 2 today?
The last time I played Diablo 2 seriously was in about 2009 or 2010.
Okay.
But that was like playing it quite a lot, like
right.
to a disruptive level. I still play it from time to time when I want to try something out these days.
Sure. What was it about that game that hooked you?
I'm not quite sure. Like, it felt really good to play, and then you wanted to play a lot, and then it kept feeling really good to play. And that's a combination of a lot of elements that were right in that game.
Yeah.
Like, I really, and this may just be the nostalgia speaking, but I really love the atmosphere of it and the areas and the graphics, despite it initially being 640 by 480.
Right.
You know, it looks and feels wonderful to me. And the item system is just spot on for creating addiction.
And obviously that leads into Path of Exile.
Right.
At what point did you decide from playing Diablo 2 that you wanted to make another game?
So I didn't intend to be a game developer when I was
Right.
going through university and stuff. I just thought I'd be a boring programmer. So I'm a programmer by training, despite
Sure.
the fact I don't work on Path of Exile's code very often. And so think of it as a business opportunity where people had been playing a lot of Diablo 2, and at the time there was no apparent sequel or successor to this. And so we identified that, well, if no one else is making any action RPGs that have all the correct components to them, that this is a market that it might be worth looking at, to making another action RPG. And there were various games like Titan Quest that had come out that were great, but missed a few key components. Like Titan Quest didn't have random levels, and it didn't have secure online play. So if you played a multiplayer, you could kind of, cheat your items by copying your save game around and
Right.
that kind of stuff. So we figured that it was important to make a game that not only had the cool action combat of D2, but also secure online play. It's properly online from the beginning.
Right. You wanted the integrity of the economy there.
Yeah, because the game's all about having items that your friends don't have, and then you feel good about having them.
Yeah.
So we wanted to try to get all of the key elements of what we perceived the successful action RPG genre to have, even if there was only one successful game in that genre so far.
Yeah.
Now, of course, there are several more because there are other games like that too.
Sure. We first met when I was working in the U.S., and you were showing Path of Exile off for the first time.
That's right. The very first day of publicity, you were there.
Yes. And I remember at that meeting when you guys told me that it was going to be free to play, and I was like super surprised because it was a lot better looking than I had expected. So a little bit of background. I got a random phone call, my boss got a random phone call from New Zealand saying we want to show off this game, and my boss assigned this for me to cover, and you guys turned up, and I was like not expecting a whole lot because random developers from New Zealand, game I'd never heard of in a genre that wasn't popular anymore. And I was blown away because it looked good and it had all these crazy customizable game design decisions in there. And you showed me the passage tree, which at that point I don't think had notables. It was just like attributes and stuff all on the same node. And you showed me the gem system. I was like, this is awesome, and I was super pumped. And then you told me it was going to be free to play. At what point had you guys decided that Path of Exile was going to be free to play?
So prior to starting Path of Exile, we played some games like Maple Story, which were free to play, admittedly not in Western markets, in Korea, for example. And so we appreciated the fact that there were huge advantages to this for us. I mean, for a start, there's the fact that one of the barriers of entry of someone having to put money up front is gone. And if you're an indie developer, you need to get rid of every substantial barrier for entry. If we could have the game be a 1 megabyte download, we would do. That's an example of a barrier for entry that's harder to get past. And so it had the advantage that you can get people playing more easily and then find a way of incentivizing them to pay you later.
Sure.
In addition, we thought it would be a really good marketing thing to be the West's first free-to-play game. And no, we weren't, by a long shot. There were a lot of free-to-play games before us, and that's because it takes a lot longer to make a game than we thought at the time. Yeah. But we knew from the beginning we wanted it to be free-to-play because, honestly, it would just help us actually get the product well-known. I mean, this is back in the time where, while you can launch on Steam, there's still people buying games in the shops. You know, it was 2006.
Yes. Yeah.
And so how would we persuade a publisher to take our random game from New Zealand that's made by a bunch of guys in a garage and actually put it in shops and fund that and give us a good shelf space?
Right.
Whereas free-to-play lets us just, spread on the internet.
Mm-hmm. Had you always planned for Path of Exile to be a successful business, or had you initially decided that you would work on this as a hobby project?
It was a business endeavor. We put our life savings into it. We did it full time. We did projections and spreadsheets, and business plan.
Was that from the get-go? Or
Yep.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, it was a conscious decision to go all in and to do this. And that was mostly because we figured there are, 10 plus million players who would enjoy a game like this, who have great memories of playing Diablo 2 or other online games, who currently have nothing to play in this type of game.
Right. That's gutsy.
Yeah, it's not a recommended course of action, because survivorship bias means that we're here now and people played the game and they enjoyed it. But realistically, 95% of projects that start out like that unfortunately fail for one reason or another.
Yeah.
When was D3 announced?
I remember this. So D3 was announced in 2008, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, it was 2008. And I remember they were doing a marketing, like a teaser thing leading up to it, where they had some ice cracking where, it was Diablo behind it. And so I was very apprehensive, trying to persuade myself, oh, this is clearly a StarCraft game. Like, very clearly another StarCraft game, obviously. Or maybe a World of Warcraft thing. A bit in denial. And I watched the Diablo 3 reveal that they did at the Invitational event, which I think was in France that they were running. And I felt a bit of relief because it wasn't the same type of game that we were making. It was quite different. And
From the teaser trailer, you got this impression.
Yeah, they did a demo on stage and so on. And
Yeah.
this was good for us because it meant we could just double down on what we were doing, which is darker and grittier, and had more of an emphasis on character customization. Targets players who have more experience with action RPGs, because Diablo 3 is a lot easier to play and to get into than Path of Exile is.
Yeah.
And so it let us just do what we do and not worry too much, because Blizzard does what they do, and we both have successful games in that genre.
Yeah.
When the real money auction house was first discussed, I think this would have been 2009 or 2010. It was not too long before the game actually came out. Did that worry you at all, or what was your first impression of that decision?
Every game developer who has an online game that has trading has to struggle with the fact that players are going to attempt to trade their time for money.
Yeah.
And if it's possible for players to, then people are going to try to make a business out of it and do it on a mass scale.
Yeah.
And so this is something we've put a lot of effort into Path of Exile, is clamping down on people that are running businesses trying to sell items in the game.
Right.
And a lot of our resources and a lot of the players' contributions to the game go towards stopping this to give them a fair playing field.
Yeah.
And so Blizzard had seen this with Diablo 2, and their approach for Diablo 3 is that by democratizing it and letting it be a thing where players can easily do it from one player to another, then there's no reason for a big studio to go into business, because every player has equal access to this. So it's with noble intention, but not something I would suggest we do for Path of Exile.
Right. Yeah. Sure. I mean, yeah, that was not met with a lot of love from the player base, it seemed like, as well, because it seemed to also incentivize the worst behaviors, because it became a money-making endeavor that was endorsed.
I thought it was also a way for them to continually get revenue from the game, because didn't they take a small portion? Steam, when you sell an item on Steam, they take a tiny portion as well.
Yeah.
So I thought it was like that, and because they didn't have microtransactions, they did have this little tax on the auction house.
Blizzard are in a unique position out of all the developers in the world, where they probably don't need that revenue as much as other people would. Like they can sell. I mean, they sold a lot of units of that game at full price, and because it was sold digitally through their platform, they get all the money. There's no need for the shops and the distributors and FedEx and so on to take their cuts. And so they have the ability to just release, like with Overwatch. They just release the game, people pay money for it, everyone's happy.
And they also have a lot of inter-game marketing through these games. Like when you bought Diablo, you got pets in World of Warcraft and all sorts of stuff. So
yeah, they're real good with that cross.
Very good, like user base pre-installed, basically. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other games you played in the lead up to Path of Exile development. So let's say between the years 2000 and 2006. Obviously, a lot of Diablo 2.
Yep. So in terms of games that actually directly influenced Path of Exile, an obvious one is Final Fantasy VII.
Yep.
We loved that game and all played it a lot. Magic the Gathering is an example of a game, while not a computer game, at least at the time, which affected Path of Exile in many ways. In terms of other things that I played a bunch, I really liked Guild Wars 1. And this is kind of the unsung, quiet inspiration for some of Path of Exile. Like, our instancing system in the game is identical to the kind of thing they were doing in Guild Wars 1, with the exception that we support cross-instance parties. But aside from that, it is actually the same. Like, they had it so you could log into your gateway in any country, and it's part of the same big realm. You can transfer your characters across implicitly by going to another town to meet with someone. There's all of the stuff that they did, including their really good patching system and so on, which was incredibly ahead of its time in terms of technology. So Guild Wars 1 is a great example.
That was interesting because, I mean, that's another company that started off as 3 dudes quitting their normal professions and deciding to make a game in their kitchen.
3 is a good number.
Yeah. Other than Guild Wars 2, sorry, other than Guild Wars, rather, and you mentioned MapleStory as sort of one of the free-to-play inspirations. Were there other less clear inspirations for Path of Exile?
We played a lot of other online RPGs at the time, like an example would be Mu Online, the original one, which had quite a following in some countries, despite being something that Western countries didn't get a lot of exposure to. That was very interesting, kind of as a lesson of how not to do some parts of game design. And I don't say that to criticize it, but I just say that because we can see the exact consequences. Like, it answers the question. If you put a fairy at the end of the bridge who gives you a significant buff at level 1 so you can kill the monsters trivially and feel super powerful, what does this do to your character progression?
Right.
Is it good for the short term? Is it good for the long term? And we can answer that by seeing how people played in that game without having to try that in Path of Exile.
Right.
So that was quite interesting. I also played a variety of other non-RPG style games. In fact, like, for example, I played a ton of Dance Dance Revolution.
Really?
I was really good at that. This is back when I was fitter and thinner. But I mean,
That's awesome.
so I played a ton of that. I played the board game Othello, like sometimes called Reversey, quite a lot. There's a lot of other gaming things that didn't make it into Path of Exile.
Right.
Like, maybe some lessons I learned from DDR made it in, but that's really kind of tangential.
Rhythm.
Rhythm.
Yeah.
Some of the boss fights are kind of DDR-esque.
I didn't do any of the boss fights in Path of Exile. I've kept my hands 100% off that because there are much better developers for that at our studio.
We do have some very good fight designers. Let's ask another Rikus question. This is one we always ask people. Are there any office rituals or quirks?
Rituals.
Yeah. We've talked a little bit, I think, in the past about the goat head.
Yeah.
But now
who made there's a plushy goat head now.
Yes.
That
So Nicole, that's Jonathan's wife, made
Yeah.
this, and she really likes making soft toys. And she used to work as a vet nurse before they got married, and so she understands the anatomy of what a goat's head would actually be. And so this thing's got cartilage and vertebrae,
Yeah, it is a soft, plushy, cute at first looking,
I heard you can see
quite large goat head.
I haven't seen it, but I've heard that like where the neck would be, you can see like where its spine.
Yep,
and
you
all
can
that
see the
sort of
spinal
thing,
column
it's
and
all,
stuff.
yeah. But it's all plushy. I haven't.
Yeah, it's
So
actually really
the
cool.
ritual with this, as I'm sure you've discussed before, is that at the point where QA has sanctioned a patch and gives it go-ahead or goat head due to one unfortunate autocorrect, the goat head is passed symbolically to the producer who's in charge of it, who then, after he's happy that everything's done, will pass it to the server guys for deployment. And so recently, this ritual has involved a lot of WTFing as the actual goat head is passed around.
Yeah. Although
pretty
those in the
awesome.
know love it.
Yeah. That's cool.
are
I
there-
didn't realize it came from an autocorrect. I thought it was just from people just saying go ahead, and so much until it just morphed into its own word.
Well, we'd include pictures of goat heads in the emails and that kind of stuff.
Oh man, that's so cool.
I mean, Google
that's
image search is good for them.
Yeah, okay.
We have a sheep skull at my home, and I tried to convince my partner that we should donate it to the company. She was on board.
Why do you have a sheep skull?
Put a plushie around that.
I'm not at
Yeah.
liberty to discuss why we.
Yeah,
we
but
actually
you-
have 2 sheep skulls.
And she's very keen to keep them where they belong.
Yeah. For the
Speaking of rituals.
when we want that black mask. This is from this is the last of the Rikus questions. What's a typical day like? Now we've heard this from a few different people. What I would be curious to hear about is what was a typical day like before you guys had a game to show off. Like, let's say early 2007. I assume at this point you had a very basic, maybe shell of a game and
Yeah.
server.
Okay, so early 2007, I was living at a different place to where I live now, which
Yep.
is where the company was based in our garage.
Yep.
And so in early 2007, oh man, things were incredibly different. So Jonathan would frequently stay over. So we'd wake up in the morning and we'd go for a walk to a nearby bakery or whatever, get some breakfast, come back. Eric would turn up, who was also living nearby. And back then we had, I believe, like Harry would come into work occasionally. This was about a year before Severn joined us.
Now, how long after you guys had formally started working on Path of Exile was Harry hired?
A couple of months. So he's hit 10 years now.
Yeah.
Now, can you clear something up? Who was the first official hire at Grinding Gear?
I
Now-
can't remember if it was Harry or Yuri. That's George, who used to work with us. I think it was Harry, actually. Pretty sure that I had to go and do all the legal paperwork and work out how to hire people for Harry.
Oh, cool.
Because Harry claims that he was the first employee, but then Jonathan also said Reese was the first employee.
No, we asked Jonathan and he said Dylan.
Oh,
So
okay.
I can confirm, having checked this, that both Dylan and Reese were hired after Harry.
Okay.
But we were talking with Dylan around this time. It's just he hadn't done anything for us. You see,
Right.
Dylan's a web programmer and Harry is a game programmer, and we needed game programmers before we needed a website. So this is the reason there. So I think very early 2007, Harry hadn't quite yet started working in the office, and so at the time, this is going to sound terrible. At the time, we really liked Command & Conquer 3. So the typical workday involved quite a lot of Command & Conquer 3, just in the middle of the day. The thing is, my brother was hanging out with us a fair amount, and while he hasn't worked on Path of Exile, he also enjoyed Command & Conquer 3. So at some point, me or Jonathan or my brother or Eric would say CNC, and then the rest of the day is written off as we play that. Now, of course, once we actually
Why
had
can't we
staff,
do that nowadays?
well, we weren't paying ourselves the salary. We were just sitting there trying not to spend money. As soon as we had people in the office who we were paying, we then couldn't just sit there playing games while they're slaving away. So this is the thing we could do
You
back.
could, arguably you could, because you're still not taking a salary in theory.
Yeah, we didn't want to discuss that with them though. But we played a lot of CNC, and there were some shenanigans. Like, what's awesome is when a patch comes out. So we read the patch notes fastidiously, and then update my brother's machine that he was using in my garage to the new version of the patch, and just don't mention it. And the thing is, we know all the balance changes, so all the old strategies subtly don't work. Or even better is to not update the machines, but to read the patch notes, and then you know what the broken things are that they've decided to fix,
Right.
or bugs.
Huh.
Yes,
Right.
there's some good times back then, but
That's
That is some
awesome.
deep play happening. Like we played,
There's some psychological
Yeah.
games going on there.
we never played at that level. That's
well, this was before games auto updated themselves through Steam or whatever, because we just installed it from bits of plastic they put in the
Yeah.
case. And at this time, we were also interviewing programmers, and we got the interesting thing where, to enter the garage at the time, you could either go through the big garage door, which required us opening it, and that was a pain, because then all the kids that are playing on their skateboards on the street would look inside and,
man.
get suspicious.
Yeah.
Or you could walk around the back, the back of the garage, where there's a clothes hanger with my wife's laundry on it and everything. And so we'd hire people, we'd get people in for an interview. They'd arrive in a suit, and we'd walk them past a whole bunch of pink laundry, let them in the back door of a garage where we're sitting there basically having a LAN with pizza boxes on the floor and everything, and then try to interview them from a serious position.
Oh, man.
And I tell you, it got easier to hire people once you have an office.
Yep. How?
you've watched Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah,
Do you feel like any?
most of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of kinship there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good show.
Yes. How did you hire your first employee? Is my question. How
So,
did?
Harry and Jonathan had met at university, and so it was
Okay.
just a matter of saying, "Hey, bro, come work for us." Okay, cool.
Right. Okay.
And
so
then there's his 20s gone.
he wasn't. He wasn't so put off by the blatant unprofessionalism of working past laundry in a garage. That's good. How did your wife feel about you basically consuming the garage as a workspace?
She started off unhappy about it and became less happy about it over time. And it was difficult because game development comes with some long hours, and that meant I was spending a lot of time basically living in the garage. And this meant that there was always someone there to talk to or to work on the game with. So it became a 16-hour-a-day thing, and I wasn't spending enough time with my wife. And so us deciding to get an office space for the company once it was large enough was partly to try to get some kind of work-life balance back again.
Right.
So that I could actually spend time with her in our space without it being constantly a company thing.
Right.
Also, implicitly, she didn't like having to clean up after 7 guys.
Yeah.
And there was only one bathroom because it's a house,
man.
so-
Oh, jeez.
yeah.
and I'm sure if she walked in and you guys are just playing Command and Conquer, it's not a good look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's happy to play her own game. She's a big gamer herself, but at the same time, she wasn't 100% happy with the fact she didn't really have a house anymore.
Right.
And so at the point where we had to move to an office for council reasons and stuff, we decided it would be a good time to do that for family reasons too.
That makes sense. All right, let's ask a question from Dirk Austin. This is another way to ask all of our guests. What is your favorite class? Now, I think usually this is locked to Path of Exile when we ask it, right? But let's open it up to more games as well. What's your favorite? Let's start with Path of Exile class, and then we'll talk about some other games.
So my Path of Exile class changes a lot because I get excited working on various parts of the expansion that we're doing, and so during it, I think I have to play this build. I have to play this build. And by the time it comes out and I get a chance to play, there are several favorite classes to pick from at the time. I've frequently gone back to playing melee classes in Path of Exile, and this is partly because I want to make sure that they're as good as they can be, and it's important for someone to be playing them, but also because I really like the Cyclone skill. And so, while Cyclone characters often turn into Sunder characters and so on, I do typically resonate with melee characters, but I'll have some crazy idea that once I've farmed enough currency with my melee character, I'm going to go and build a whatever it is other character that's too complicated for me to understand.
Right.
Were there any builds of the week that you took into your own game?
There is a build of the week that so this is funny. The Flame Totem build way back at the beginning both got that guy hired, and that guy is possibly the most influential developer on Path of Exile since then. This is Mark, who is basically, game director now for that game and all but title. And it also meant that I played a Flame Totem character for a very large amount of time. And that was the most bittersweet nerf, I think. At the time I was in charge of balance, and it's like, okay, this is pretty good. Probably too good. I have to change it. Maybe I can change it next week.
That's such a responsible developer move instead of being like, let's buff this so I'm even more powerful.
But it certainly was bittersweet trying to work out how and to what extent. And I'm glad now that I don't have to make individual skill decisions. It's made by much more competent people. I can play whatever I want and not care whether or not it's nerfed.
My favorite class, I don't know if I've ever talked about this, I tend to gravitate towards the Templar. And I really don't know why that is, because...
So there's no pants, isn't it?
He is, without a doubt... the most awkward looking character in the game on a few different levels. He's left-handed. He's got that super long neck, and he doesn't wear pants. And he was also, I think, the first character model, possibly, that was added.
I think the Ranger might have been the first.
Okay. The Ranger looks better. But man, for some reason, playing the Templar is super fun. And I think a part of it is just I love totems. Totems are my preferred playstyle. It's basically like a tower defense game with loot, which I think is perfect. We've got another question from Dirk Austin, which is, what is your favorite game? And I have a guess for this.
So my favorite game throughout my life has been Diablo 2.
Yep.
But I would say that my opinion of the best game is The Binding of Isaac.
Oh.
Interesting.
And I say this, and I haven't played as much of it as I'd like only hundreds of hours rather than thousands.
Yeah.
But I say this because I think it actually is basically the perfect mixture of roguelike elements that give massive amount of replayability and so many cool secrets. You can play it for hundreds of hours and still be discovering abusive stuff to do in that game. And that's before they even added any expansions.
Right.
And while it's nothing like Path of Exile in terms of finding items that persist on your character, it doesn't tick the box of persistent progress beyond its small systems.
They've got some small
Yeah, the small things, but you don't have a single persistent character.
Right.
It still encapsulates the entire character journey into a 20-minute to 1 hour playthrough.
Yeah.
And so I think that it is, in my opinion, one of the best games.
I played quite a lot of that game. I found some very frustrating parts. I didn't enjoy, for example, how often your life had to be used as a resource. There are lots of secrets where you have to take damage for the secret to work. There's sacrifice rooms or whatever they're called. And I always felt like there was so much pressure on your life that it made it unfeasible to play some of the low life characters. Some of them, they start off with different life values. But I also didn't get that good at that game. So that might be why. Have you played the Rebirth, the more recent version of that?
I have it installed and I've played 10 minutes of it, but I haven't got into it yet, partly because I know that when I start playing it, that's what my evenings will become. And so I actually bought a Nintendo Switch with Zelda, so that I could play Zelda was the ostensible thing, but in the back of my mind is the plan that they will release The Binding of Isaac, and then it'll have a portable device with a controller, because that's important to actually be playing it with decent controls.
Yeah.
And so I know that's out now, and yeah, I'm worried it's going to consume my life once I think of this at home.
When did you get the Switch? I hadn't heard that you got one.
I got it at release. I got it after being in America at release and watching the queues of like 3 kilometers of people queued up along each of the shops.
Yeah.
So I have a look on the New Zealand site, Mighty Ape, and they've got a couple in stock. So I order that, and then it's kind of been sitting there, which is terrible, and I'm a bad person.
You should
Well, you
play
should-
Zelda.
My
Zelda's
wife's been playing
amazing.
it, which is good, but
Zelda's so good.
yes, and I should play Zelda.
Zelda is really good. Like I played it on your Wii U to death. It seems. Like,
Literally.
yeah.
Like,
Killed
broke
your
my
Wii U playing it.
I don't think he actually did, but I'm still gonna blame you.
I'll play it over Christmas.
That is probably my favorite game. And
Is-
Mario is coming out later this month. Mario Odyssey, if you're a platformer fan.
There's
I'm
DLC
very
for that
excited
coming out soon, right? For,
Zelda?
Yeah, Zelda.
A bunch of DLC got released, and I think there is, yes, at the end of this year, or maybe even this month or something, there's like a whole new sub-story.
That's cool.
So I'm going to be getting that. I don't often buy the same game twice, but I will be buying Zelda a second time.
Oh man, you're like Severn now.
How many times have you bought GTA 5?
Buying great games.
Yeah, yeah.
Buying the same great game over and over and over again?
3.
3?
Yeah.
Have you bought DLC for any of them?
They give it to you for free.
Okay.
That's how much of a good guy they are.
You only had to buy the game 3 times for that.
I still don't regret it.
That's fair. Honestly, like I'm gonna buy Zelda a second time, so I can't judge. It sounds to me, Chris, like your favorite game genre is a roguelike. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yep.
Are there any other game genres that you're particularly fond of?
I do like space trading games as well. I played the original Frontier. That's the 2 games before Elite Dangerous in the series. A ton when I was a kid, like 12 years old. So I do really like space trading games also.
What do you think of Star Citizen? Like, how do you think that's
yeah.
cool?
I'm going to wait for it to come out and get reviewed, and then decide whether I want to play it.
All right. You're not getting hyped up for
Not,
that. You're
not pre-buying some ships.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. I've got a friend that spent over $100 on ships already. That
What do you think of? I know Path of Exile was crowdfunded in its closed beta.
Yeah, it depends how you define crowdfunded and depends how you define beta, but sure.
Well, early on, before launch, it was crowdfunded and off of Kickstarter. You guys, I think, ran your own, right?
Yeah, it's just like we do with supporter packs now,
Yeah.
but labeled more like crowdfunding then.
Yeah. And to some extent, crowdfunding has started to die down. It seems like. Am I wrong in thinking that?
I think people are just more cautious on what they actually fund,
Yeah.
so things aren't getting funded as
So,
much.
When you look at a
Not-
game,
It's not the crazy wild west of it's coming to the end of the crazy wild west of crowdfunding. I
Right.
think.
yes. When you look at a game like Star Citizen, where they've now earned, I think, somewhere in the vicinity of like $90 million, and as of yet don't have a game. What are you thinking? Like, Path of Exile has been out for quite a while, and it's very successful, but $90 million without a game to show seems like kind of crazy, right?
Yeah, every moment that we hadn't formally released Path of Exile, but it's still accepted people's money, I felt a duty to make sure the game came out.
Yeah.
Like when we actually got to say, this is the released version with 1.0 back in 2013, and take the beta away, that was a good moment because I felt that, okay, we have now delivered what people paid for in terms of there is a game. We'll continue to expand it for them, and if they paid their money, they don't necessarily need to pay more, but
Sure.
we feel good that we've met our obligation now. And, I'm sure Star Citizen will be a great product for the amount of money that they've poured into it. We just have to wait for them to decide it's ready. It's kind of an
Do you think
exercise
it'll
in
ever
scope,
be
really.
ready?
Well, it has to be, right?
I don't know. I knew I worked for some people who ultimately made a Kickstarter for a game. Earned, I think the more than $1 million went into it. The game was meant to come out this year, I think, according to their original Kickstarter. And as of like late last year, I think they announced that they had just hired a programmer. So there are, obviously Star Citizen is a little more professional than that, but there's like some very high profile projects that have never seen the light of day. And I worry about games like that where huge amounts of money go into a product. People have functionally paid for and bought a game that they may never see for at least several years or at all.
Well,
And there's no real accountability for that.
without answering your question directly, I reckon that products are higher quality when
Yeah.
you get something out for the players to play in a complete form with a complete loop, and then
Yeah.
incrementally improve them based on feedback over time, as opposed to sit there in the dark making something where no one sees what it is until release day.
Sure.
Which is how many big games are made, but it can also be why there are big game failures, because on release day, people wish they had iterated on a certain loop a number of times to make it better.
That's fair. So you reckon that the method of getting the core gameplay out early and then iterating on it?
Yeah, I
the
think
way
that
to
would
go.
be, I think that would guarantee quality more, and hopefully when we roll the dice on a big product like this, it comes out positive.
There have been a lot of... I remember a while ago there was a lot of talk in the games industry about these sort of early access things. You should treat them as your launch because you only really get one launch. And if your early access is the first time the majority of your players see your game, there's a good chance that they might not like it. So is there not an inherent risk in releasing something that is not in a great state, or at least not good enough to be considered like a launched game?
I think people should challenge the you only get one launch thing. So we were careful with Path of Exile. When we entered our closed beta, we got a lot of press. People liked the game, they wanted to play it. And that's basically a launch. As you say, you only get one.
Yeah.
But the game was also bad compared to where it was later. So when we did our actual open beta launch, we had significantly higher amount of interest and numbers. That was a second launch. Then we did our real release launch. Again, bigger numbers. And we successfully managed to have multiple launches. Maybe it was careful branding, maybe it was marketing, maybe it's a product of what game development was like 5 years ago. But, I mean, the launch we had recently was bigger numbers again.
Yeah.
And sure, this is potentially what successful games do when you have an attracted audience. But
Yeah.
I think that if people try very hard to have multiple launches that are clearly understood by the players of what's different, then they can release a thing and then make it better and then release it again and still see uptake.
I think, like, also, going into early access too early can really be a bad thing. I think that's when,
Yeah.
well, that's when that you only launch one once kind of really comes into it. Because, like, Path of Exile, I played before I was working for Grinding Gears, I played a open beta weekend, and there was like 2 acts, and I mean there was still quite a lot of stuff there. Like I had a good solid weekend of just playing Path of Exile, whereas like I'll go on Steam and occasionally buy an early access game that has like 2 hours of gameplay, and then they're like, oh yeah, more's coming over the next
Right.
I don't know 3 years or something, and I think that's really more damaging. So if you go into early access, with like a decent amount of gameplay, it's definitely like
I
better
think
for you.
my personal opinion, Path of Exile's Path of Exile is built around the idea of being able to replay that content countless times. Besides the fact that the areas are randomized and loot is randomized, like all of the character systems are built with huge amounts of flexibility in mind, and the idea of like re-rolling and making new characters and new builds as part of the long-term game structure, I think sets it apart from, for example, a No Man's Sky clone.
Yep.
Like an open world walking simulator.
Yep.
Where areas are procedurally generated, and it's cool, and maybe you have 4 planets or whatever in the early access, and maybe there's going to be 12 by the time it comes out. But if you don't have if you're done with those 4 planets and you realize there's not a lot else to do outside of that. This happened to me with Starbound. Starbound was similar-ish to Terraria. Lots of worlds, lots of crafting, lots of upgrading to do. But if you've done that core loop a few times, you're, at least in my opinion, I was like, okay, I get it. And I never played it again.
Yeah, I played that in early access as well, and Rory is still playing it, and occasionally we'll talk about it. And there's 10 times the amount of stuff that there was when I played it, but I'm just like, I feel like I've played it, so I'm not gonna try it again, even though I probably should. But
yeah, that is the hump that I struggled to get over with early access as well.
I think that a lot of the reason people launch their games in early access is because they ran out of money. That's what happened with us. We said, I have literally 1 month worth of salaries left to pay people. This is the point I should start telling them, but why don't we turn sales on and see what happens? And it was fine after that.
Yeah.
But that was the point where I was looking into how do I sell my magic cards.
Right.
And when you did launch into early access, because I don't know how long it had been in when I played that open thing. How much of the game actually was there? Was there 2 acts, or was it just the one act? Or?
I think it was 2 acts. We definitely hadn't released... So we released Act 3X at the release of the game in October 2013. That means we released Act 3 at the beginning of open beta, which means during the closed beta period that you were talking about where they had open weekends, that would have just had 2 acts.
Yeah.
Val Oversoul was the final boss.
Yeah.
And it would have been better if more people's first impression of Path of Exile was a finished game.
Yes.
Without a doubt, if our early access had been a finished game, we'd be in a much better position. But that's not possible, right? Like, we'd run out of money. We'd already tapped our friends for money. We couldn't really get any more. I mean, there's a long rant about where you can get money from to fund games, like whether it comes from a publisher, whether it comes from a venture capitalist, whether it comes from the gamers themselves, whether it comes from yourself and your friends and family. And they all have pros and cons. But at the end of the day, getting it from the gamers as pre-sales is effective because all the incentives are aligned. These are the people you're actually meant to get the money from eventually, and it also lets you validate whether or not they're willing to pay you. Because if you start using other people's money for too long and never actually see whether the gamers want to pay for what you're wanting, then it's a train wreck waiting to happen that ruins your investors.
I think with the game, the other thing I think that worked for Path of Exile in early access that doesn't necessarily work for a lot of other games in early access is that Path of Exile was built with free-to-play in mind. And so access to the game was not the only or even main revenue stream. It was always going to be like cosmetics and stash tabs, right? So you compare it to, you know, a lot of the early access games where it's like you pay, so let's say the Minecraft model, you pay half the price, half of the final price now, and you get the game, and you'll get the full version of the game forever. It seems like you are cutting out a revenue stream later on. And that seems to be at least what I saw several years ago, was a lot of games doing the Minecraft model of, you know, cheap game now, full game later, and then never actually getting enough people later because the initial impression had been so lackluster.
To some extent, the math suggests it's better to have expensive game now, cheaper game later.
Yes,
because you get the price discrimination.
It seemed backwards to me.
Like, yeah, that seems like such a hump to get people over there. Like such a gate.
Like, imagine we had some fancy new product that the world wanted to play.
Yeah.
Which we don't necessarily, but if we had some product and you say it's $1,000 to get in, you would be guaranteed to get your ardent fans who are willing to pay $1,000 to get in. And then later you go, okay, you know, now it's only $100, now it's $50. And in each case, people become more willing to pay. I mean, obviously, we'll never price a thing like that. That's crazy. But from an economics point of view, I think that it... Which I failed to remember.
I think it was this. It was start off really expensive.
But it lets you get your core fans in at one price point and then gradually open it up until eventually people are getting in for free because they're the people that weren't willing to pay for it.
Does that not anger the core fans, though? Or are they just the core fans?
As long as they're getting like content commensurate with the amount that they're paying. If they get, for example, the exclusive microtransaction style stuff.
Yeah.
They have some sort of status thing that they can show
off. You can be transparent with them. Hey guys, this isn't always going to cost $1,000 to get in.
That's
the thing is, implicitly, okay, so let's look at the closed beta for Path of Exile. So we said, here's a closed beta for this game. It's got a bit of popularity recently. People want in, and we're not going to give it out to a lot of people because we want to have a small number of testers for the time being. So we put a thing on the website inviting people every, say, 10 minutes. And it was the beta key timer that's gone down in history to some extent within the community. And so we invite people every 10 minutes, and of course they watch the timer and hope it's them that's picked. People were absolutely buying accounts off each other, right? Like a guy would play the game for a day, say, oh, cool, I've played the closed beta now. How much can I get for my account?
Oh, wow.
$1,000. And so they are selling the accounts to each other for those amounts of money. It's just that the company who actually can use the money to make the game better isn't capturing any of that.
And this happens with even like paid games like World of Warcraft. Closed beta access to their expansions, you could sell accounts for quite a lot.
Right. So when we priced our closed beta, it was $10 for the lowest pack because at the time we thought that was a fair value proposition. Since then, we've raised the price of getting into betas to $30 later on because we understand it actually represents more value than what we were initially targeting it at. And pricing is the hardest thing to do with running a business because, well, if you make it too expensive, you lose. If you make it too cheap, you lose. Have fun with that.
How did you work out how to price things for Path of Exile?
Guessing.
Was it just really trial and error?
It's just common sense and asking people stuff. And when things are too expensive, players will say so, and you can make adjustments. When things are too cheap, you can see there's overwhelming amount of demand for them, and you could have priced them differently. But, I mean, things costing money is not a bad thing for the players because we put the money towards improving the game. And you guys can all attest to the fact we have like 100 people in the office now working on making some pretty cool things.
So we're pretty much... We've run out of time for episode 1, I believe.
Do we want to keep going or
How are you feeling?
I've got plenty of time. It's
Cool.
Cool.
We'll have a little break.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this, that's the end of episode 1. You can email us some questions at frontseatquestions@gmail.com or tweet at us at frontseatcast. Let us know what you thought of this episode. Let Chris know which balance changes you want. Don't do that. I'm kidding. We've got a Facebook page, facebook.com/frontseatcast. Frontseatgamer.wordpress.com is our website where we read our comments sometimes. And we've got a YouTube channel, youtube.com/frontseatcast. We'll be back soon. Next week?
Yeah, next week.
Next week with the part 2 of our episode with Chris. See you then. Bye.
I also have some stories about the Transformers toys. Oh yeah. We had this thing where I was at university, and this guy turns up, and he's just come from a toy shop with boxes of Transformers toys and big bags, and he puts them down on the table and goes, "I've been shopping." And so I say, "Oh, that's awesome. What did you get?" And he shows us the toys, and the current generation ones. And I go, "Okay, you're going to leave them sealed?" And he goes, "Damn right I'm leaving them sealed."
The current generation.
Yeah, in boxes. And I go, "Oh, I have all the 1980s original ones. I mean, not all, but most. I mean, I got them as a kid." And he goes, "Holy crap, do you know what that's worth?" And I'm like, "Dude, these have been chewed on. I've put them in the toilet, right? You know, I was like 3 or 4." And he goes, "Why would you open them?" It's like, I was like 4 years old.
As a 3-year-old, you didn't have any sense that they might be worth something?